somebody wants to change the plan. But it's also about institutionalizing the process, you see. And China, I think, has come a long way. How many of you are from China here? Great. Well, welcome to Singapore. I think the Chinese system has evolved over the years, and it's a big country and it's a very complex system. But still, I admire the fact that they tried very hard to institutionalize the processes. And many of these processes are very similar to Singapore, because we have also worked with hundreds of mayors from China, and I think they sort of got the sense that maybe some of this is good. Of course, you cannot just apply, but I think they understood the value in long-term planning. So I'm a little bit more optimistic. I don't think you can transport anything exactly, but some of the principles are useful and may be very useful to cities.
Prasenjit's second question about disaster preparedness. Chye, you want to take a shot at
Just briefly, you're right, Professor, that we do not have typhoons or hurricanes or earthquakes. So we don't really, have some of these kind of problems. But, it's in the tropics, so we do get our fair share of very intense thunderstorms and floods. And I showed the pictures of floods in the early days. And I think we are a low-lying island. The idea of disaster preparedness, I think, starts with the idea of sustainability in your approach to planning. So I think even in the early days when we thought about planning Singapore and reclaiming land or designing our drainage system, I mean, we had the experience of floods then, right? So when we designed our drainage system, for example, we were very clear that we did not just want to design a drainage system for 5 years or 10 years, but we wanted to design a drainage system that would, as the concept plan showed, that as Singapore became more urbanized, that the drainage system would be able to accommodate, what comes may. Of course, in the last couple of years, I mean, that system has held up very, very well for many decades. With climate change, it is now under test, and again, our planners are relooking into how can we make it more resilient for the years ahead. In terms of sea level and reclamation, in fact, a lot of the floods are not just due to rain, but also high tide. So in fact, we made a policy decision when we reclaim land, and we reclaim a lot of land, for Marina, the downtown, and so on. We made a very conscious decision, and this was way back in the 60s and 70s, to reclaim the land above the highest high tide by about 1.15 meters. So if you go walk in the city, you look at where the sea level is today, relative to where the land is after it's reclaimed, it's actually about 3 or 4 meters above the mean sea level. A couple of years ago, when I was at PUB and reviewing the policy, we actually decided to add 1 more meter because we know from IPCC and so on that it's going to be higher. Yeah, but these decisions are difficult decisions to make, and comes back to the point of governance, because there is a cost. When you raise the level, and the HDB, Hean scratches her head, how is she going to build her new towns now, because the levels have changed. And so there are issues and problems that have to be resolved by the professionals.
Ian?
Yeah, I think certainly Singapore's in a great position to manage the risk. Coming as a civil engineer, we've had to deal with risks in our profession for centuries. I remember a former PhD student of mine who was in fact an assistant professor afterwards at NUS under Prof. Hoon, was saying that in his town in India, when the engineer built the bridge, before anybody could use it, they put the whole family underneath the bridge, and then they took elephants over the bridge, so that if the structure was defective at all, then that would be his family who would. So this is a very old story, of course, but it certainly managing risk is a complex phenomena. It's complex there's many interconnected things. It's politics. There's all kinds of boundary conditions. I think Singapore has the boundary conditions to manage it correctly. I don't know if the sea levels rise, I really don't know what's going to happen to Bangladesh, for example. That's your other extreme. But I think there's an awful lot that needs to be done and could be done. One of the things that is Singapore is one of the leaders in actually measuring their infrastructure. They've got more sensors on their infrastructure than any other country or any other city. And if you're going to manage risk, you have to know what's going on now, and you have to detect change as quickly as possible so that you can take measures. For example, if we were absolutely sure that sea levels were going to rise by 2 meters, and we were absolutely sure of this, that was going to happen in the next 50 years, at least we'd have 50 years to provide the protection around the island, and Singapore would have that time. Whereas if there was only 5 years to do it, it would be virtually impossible.
Okay, thank you, Ian. I'm glad to see many students now at the microphone. So maybe we'll take 2 questions at a time. We'll start with you, and then you, and then I'll go to you. Please.
Good evening. I'm Yuan Chen from Environmental Studies. As a Singaporean, one of the themes I have in my mind when I go through these 3 talks is that there seems to be a lack of citizen participation in making Singapore into this city. One of the ways I think we can do it is to have an EIA law where, as a process, right, you bring different stakeholders together. So right from the start, from the conceptual plan to the development cycle, through the development cycle, we have different stakeholders with the civil service to have this, to make development possible. So I would like to seek your comments on this.
Thank you very much. Just to repeat the question is whether we could have more citizen participation in the decision-making process. And in this context, he asked whether Singapore should have an environmental impact assessment law. You?
Good evening. My name is Jonathan. I'm a 3rd-year student in Tembusu. My question is actually related to the previous question. Our speakers have presented Singapore according to these measurements and comparisons, that Singapore is a very desirable city that other cities want to replicate. But this is also set against a Singaporean diaspora, as well as a lot of local citizens who are not very happy and who seem to complain a lot. So my question really is, to what extent is a citizen's pride for its city a relevant measure or factor in deciding a city's desirability?
Sorry, repeat your question.
To what extent is a citizen's pride for their city a relevant factor or measurement in deciding a city's desirability?
Okay, pride, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Citizen pride.
Citizen pride.
Your reference to diaspora, I don't think the fact that there's a Singaporean diaspora means that they left because they were unhappy. You know, if you look at Switzerland, which is a great country, Switzerland has a huge diaspora in the world, yeah, and the Swiss government very carefully tender the relations with this diaspora. No, so but your question is a good one.
Yeah.
To what extent is one's pride in one city a measurement of, I guess,
A desirable or model
the
city.
success of a city, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe we take one
Thank
more
you.
question on this side. Yes.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ingmar Salim. I'm a 2nd-year history major in Tembusu College. Okay, my question is like this. I come from Jakarta, which is very famous for its traffic jams, crime rates, and every single thing that is perhaps lacking in Singapore. So the question is this. If there is one thing that, that this panel of experts can recommend that Jakarta follows, what will it be? Okay. Because the thing is that, incidentally, the governor of Jakarta is visiting NUS at the end of this month, and I'm attending his event, so I'm just going to see if I can pull things
great
in.
question. Three very good questions. One, citizen participation and EIA, pride in the city, and what advice would you give the governor of Jakarta? Ian, you want to start? You can pick any question you want.
Pick anyone.
Pick anyone. Yeah.
I really think pride in your city is really important and often underestimated. I think that it's very very important, and I think really Singapore has that. I think it's there was a happiness quotient that Singapore became was on top of just a month ago or so, I think. But it's I really do think that it's important to be proud of where you are without being nationalistic. We know that nationalism as a general phenomena can be very negative, and we've learned that over the past century. But to be proud of what you've got where you are, that's not necessarily being nationalistic in the traditional sense of the word. So I think it's important to like where you are, and that helps you do all kinds of things. And probably it makes you optimistic, and I think you can only progress if you're optimistic. I've never seen a pessimist get anywhere.
Thank you, Ian. Yeah, I love Singapore, so I don't understand